if we reflect back on some of our clients for a little bit, we'll see that quite often there's this derail that happens, right? Everything was fine, and then all of a sudden the thought became just a very unpleasant emotion, which then initiated some action. You're like, whoa, what happened there? That was so unlike my client, right? Like, where did that come from? So all right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, the important ones are here today.
That's right. That's right. So I'm kind of backing into the process here. We've been talking about, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I just like to revisit kind of what we've talked about so that we can take the next step going forward. And plus, as human beings, we typically have to hear things, multiple times, as we know. So the process of, thoughts becoming emotions, becoming actions, I hope if you haven't been familiar with that, it's now an awareness that not only happens in your life and in your mind, but also in your client's life. And if we can, get in front of that or help to manage that, monitor that, I think we'll be a lot better off for it. So, I think if we reflect back on some of our clients for a little bit, we'll see that quite often there's this derail that happens, right? Everything was fine, and then all of a sudden the thought became just a very unpleasant emotion, which then initiated some action. You're like, whoa, what happened there? That was so unlike my client, right? Like, where did that come from? So, that it is pretty obvious that the higher, and we know that as things get stressful, people behave differently. But in my experience, that's why. They had some thought, oh, my monthly mortgage is $300 more than my rent, kicked off an emotion. Oh, crap, what if I can't afford that? And, I lose my home, and then, my credit shot, and then the action becomes, oh, I'm out of here, right? That's a little severe, but that could be a thing. So, knowing that happens, we talked a couple of weeks back, or maybe it was last week, but, how do we feel about managing our own emotions? We all put kind of a number on there on a scale. If we had to guess, how good are we at doing that? One, being aware of our emotions, and then managing our emotions, right? I think if we always appreciate that there's a thought that precedes that, we get better at it. Oh, crap, I got to get ahead of that emotion. And here's why. Whenever that thought comes up, and those thoughts comes up because of these conversations, these topics, these issues, we'll get ahead of that. Don't even let that emotion happen, right? So, talking about emotions, now we can backtrack the thoughts a little bit. And there's this concept, this word called metacognition. And metacognition is defined as an awareness and understanding of one's own thought processes. Okay, so what are those thoughts, and how do I have those thoughts? They also give a definition here, or an example. Metacognition also involves knowing yourself as a learner. That is, knowing your strengths and weaknesses as a learner. For example, if you can explain what your strengths are in academic writing or exam taking or other types of academic tasks, then you are metacognitively aware. So that's just one example. And I think it's helpful from that standpoint just to understand what we're good at and what we're not good at. And that helps with that whole comparison mind game, right? Why is that person so good at that? It's like, well, they were designed different, right? They're a different human being. So, I think there's a lot of importance to understanding our thought process. As we go down in future weeks, there's been some techniques, some habits that I've incorporated into my life to kind of understand, manage, monitor, maintain that we'll share. But I just wanted to introduce, this process of digging deeper into, hey, if you or your clients have crappy actions, where do those crappy actions typically come from? Why do I always do the same thing? Why do I have the same outcome? Obviously, if they're good outcomes, great. But my guess is they could be even better. If they're crappy outcomes, then why is that? It's because I had an emotion that I wasn't aware of and I couldn't control that emotion. So I had a crappy, action. So let's see. There's also another one here. How do you explain metacognition? Metacognition is, put simply, thinking about one's thinking, right? Meta, right? Metadata, meta thinking, metacognition. More precisely, it refers to the processes used to plan, monitor, and assess one's understanding and performance. Metacognition includes a critical awareness of one's thinking and learning. Let me back up, sorry. Metacognition includes a critical awareness of A, one's thinking and learning, and B, oneself as a thinker and a learner. So it's getting pretty deep, but I just want to set the stage of, how we as human beings operate. And sometimes I think it's just through instinct, right? We have fears and frustrations or annoyances, things that we avoid and we run from, and other things that we gravitate towards for a reason. It's what our minds taught us how to do that. And some are healthy and some are not. Do either of you have kind of an example or experience with this idea of metacognition? Maybe not the word, but life.
I know, I'm trying to think. I'm like, oh.
Mark is too. He's got a.
No, I think that sometimes it's a matter of I don't look at it that way. It just happens. I mean, I know when I'm thinking poorly. I know when I have a negative thought. I mean, I'm aware of a lot of that anymore. And
awesome.
I try to, number one, first of all, I believe that you have to acknowledge it. And you have to, before you can actually push it aside, because if you don't acknowledge it, it'll come back to you again.
Yeah.
At least that's in my experience. And so I try to at least acknowledge it, and then I fill it with something that's more positive or whatever to kind of counteract it. So,
yeah,
I can refrain and move my mind into a different way of thinking. But by doing it is and practicing it all the time, then it basically becomes, I want to say habit, but it basically becomes something that just happens, that I just am able to just do. And so, but I think that it's important for us to at least take a look at what our negative thought is, or what our emotion is at the moment, and recognize that, and then, because that's where your learning comes from.
Yeah,
is what I believe.
Yeah, and awareness is obviously the start to the beginning. You can't modify, you can't monitor, you can't modify, you can't change something you're not aware of. So as long as you get ahead of that, go, oh, where'd that come from? And then just kind of get in the habit of retraining your mind. Like I said, even good things can be done better. It's like, oh, that's pretty, that's good, but I want it to be great. That obviously, hey man, I gotta do this. Or in the context of real estate, we got to understand what our inclination is of our clients. If they don't have a sense of awareness and they very quickly go off on these tangents, thoughts, emotion, action, it's like, whoa, we're all over the place here. How do you work best with that person? How do you kind of replace an emotion, a negative emotion, with a different thought that begets a different emotion? Right? That fear of that mortgage payment, like, well, why are we doing this? Bring that thought back, right? We're doing this because, I don't know, you wanted a bigger backyard for your dogs, or you wanted a better school district for your kids. I don't know, but that emotion associated to that is better than that fear of that mortgage payment. And if there's fear of the mortgage payment, that makes sense. Maybe not fear, but certainly, you don't want anxiety, but you want to be aware of whether that mortgage payment is a potential concern or not. But to be fearful doesn't help you.
Right.
For sure.
So anyway, So, I commend you, Mark, because obviously, again, repeating the whole 5, 15, 80 thing, again, if those numbers are anywhere near accurate, they're pretty shocking that most people don't think. And I think a lot of us, I believe a lot of us think we think, and we kind of don't, just by virtue of being busy. Life is like, it's just moving all the time, and we'd like to think, and we know how to think, but just by virtue of it being fast paced, and that isn't slowing down at all, right?
Right.
And not only is it fast paced, but we're getting bombarded with, entertainment and, things to do and activities. I mean, there's just, we really have to be active about slowing down. And that's one thing I'll get back to. But the other thing I wanted to introduce, other than metacognition today, is, well, and actually, you know what? Maybe just metacognition, just because I think we're going to talk about locus of control next week. I was going to introduce it today, but I think it's a big enough topic, and we don't have quite enough time to give it. Are either one of you familiar with locus of control?
With what?
Locus of control. Okay.
No.
Okay, so I'll introduce it, and then we can talk about it next week. But before you get into kind of how to retrain your thinking, I think you have to insert locus of control before that. Locus of control refers to an individual's perception about the underlying main causes of events in his or her life. Okay. More simply, do you believe that your destiny is controlled by yourself or external forces? Okay. My locus of control, I like to think, is more inward facing. I believe that I, for the most part, control the outcome of my life. I choose not to give it to others, the government, or my negative, friends or clients. Like, I don't, I'm not going to go through an event in my life and blame somebody else any more than is reasonable. But I think a lot of people think their locus of control is, woe is me, the world's always affecting me, right? And if you have the outward locus of control, and you think somebody else is going to fix my problems, or somebody else is the cause of my problems, I think, or they're going to make me happier or move things in a positive direction for me. I personally think that's all flawed. So again, locus of control is it outward facing or is it inward facing? So anyway, I think understanding what that is in your own mind, and that was just my personal view on things. I don't, obviously everybody has their own locus of control, but that's my thought, and I probably went too far. But anyway, I just wanted to introduce that thought because I think that's going to dictate a lot of how you monitor, manage, and and maintain your thought process going forward. And you have to really understand where you fit with that locus of control. So, any questions or thoughts on that?
Nope.
No.
You might have heard it in some slightly different variation or term or something, but it is, it is a thing. And
Right.
we'll talk more about that.
I mean, a lot of that too is just being accountable. I mean, that's the thing too. It's just being accountable. I mean, that's the one thing that's I don't see a lot of. It's being accountable for what you're doing. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's the same thing. That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example of people that have extreme outward locus of control. They blame everything on everything else. They don't look towards themselves and take accountability for what did I do?
Yeah, because I mean, that's the way I look at it, Jared, is that I can only control what I do. And in every situation, the way I feel, in every situation, no matter if it's good or bad, I play a part in whatever that is. So, I mean, I have to take a look at what my part was within that whole situation and then take accountability for that part of it, because that's the only thing that I can change.
There you go. Yep. Yeah. It sounds like you've got a very healthy inward locus of control, which everybody, operates their life in a different way. And I think it's good for us to talk about what that is and understand that, at least in ourselves, what our tendency is. And then going forward, what can we do about that? How can we
Right.
improve that?
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, well, I think we pretty
Okay.
much hit the 15-minute mark, and I'll just bless you guys. Wish you guys a blessed week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jared.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.
Take care.
See you,
too.
Carissa.